All right, we are set up here, looks like. So this is the podcast. Welcome to the show. Both of you have been integral in doing community outreach in terms of police accountability. We all know that the Department of Justice led, I think it was a 6-month, 9-month long investigation of the Minneapolis Police Department. And part of the findings that they came up with deal specifically with police violence against Native communities and Native people, and specifically targeting Native youth. So I guess before we get started, I'd just like to throw it over to you guys for introductions, and then maybe we can talk about your initial reactions to the DOJ investigation. So we'll start with you, Rachel.
Okay. My name is Rachel Dionne Thunder. Live here in South Minneapolis with the American Indian Movement, Indigenous Protectors Movement, which is a 501c3 that we're starting here in Minneapolis. Sit on the Unity Community Mediation Team, which has a lot to do with police accountability with MPD. And just happy to be here. Our buddy Nick.
Congratulations on recently getting married too, by the way.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Vin Dionne. Little Earth Protectors, American Indian Movement, Indigenous Protector Movement. I'm also a street outreach worker for the AICDC here in South Minneapolis. Born and raised here, South Minneapolis, at Little Earth. So I'm here, I'm a homeboy from here, I guess you could say. Born and raised.
Well, thanks so much for joining us and taking the time. Let's just start with the initial reactions to the DOJ report. Vinny, you've been doing this for quite a while. You've been living here, born and raised. Did the DOJ ever reach out to you or anyone that you know before they started this investigation?
I haven't heard anything about them reaching out to myself, anyone in the Native community. I haven't talked to anyone where they were like, oh yeah, the DOJ was here and asked me some questions. So we didn't hear anything about it. And of course, my initial reaction is I'm not surprised. We've been facing discrimination by the MPD for generations.
And can you just talk a little bit about like who you are and your story, just so that folks know why you are maybe an authoritative voice?
Yeah, I'll give my whole story. So I was born and raised at Little Earth as a young kid. Grew up singing on the drum, and coming up at Little Earth is a very, very rough area. It's known for gang violence. It's known for drugs. It's known for just being tough, and it is a tough area, but it's also a loving area. It's a community. But as a young man growing up, it was really heavily controlled by gangs. Gangs controlled Little Earth in those days. So as a young man, I joined a gang. So I went from being a powwow singer to being a gang member, from being a gang member to a gang leader. So I was actually a gang leader over there, running a crew of guys, teaching a lot of our young men a lot of toxic and how to do illegal stuff. At that point in time in my life, I was also a young man. And to me, I was just doing what the older ones taught me. They taught me how to live illegal. They taught me how to live toxic. They taught me how to carry guns, how to fire guns, how to sell drugs, all the bad stuff that I'm totally against now. I learned that as a young man, and I guess you could say I was a leader because I became a gang leader, and so I taught a lot of young men how to live the wrong way, and that's also why I do what I do now, because now I am looked as a leader figure in the community. So now I'm trying to teach them the right way. I still have a lot of juice with the young gang members, not the younger ones, but they're older now, but they still come to me and look for advice on things, so I try to get them more involved in positive things in the community, what's going on. I still talk to I got a lot of brothers that are doing heavy prison sentences. They're seeing me on TV, newspaper, they're reaching out to me like, yo, bro, I want to, when I get out, I want to get in with you, So I'm using, I guess, the platform I created to push positivity in the community. So I guess that's part of my story, from the gang member to, that's not even the full story. I went to a gang member, changed my life around.
Mm-hmm.
Was working at Little Earth, baseball coach, basketball coach, athletic director, cultural coordinator. I was teaching kids how to sing on the drum, just overall doing all kinds of things for the community. Security guard, we were running Little Earth Patrol back then. And then I became addicted to drugs. I got involved with pain medication through my doctor. And before I know it, I find myself stuck in addiction. Like it went bad. It went from just getting these pills, innocent enough for my doctor, thinking there was nothing wrong with it, like, oh yeah, these are my pain meds, or this is my medication, to running out of my medication, to buying it off the street, and then before I know it, I just walked away from my job one day because I was stuck in active addiction, and from there I went to, of course I have to pay bills, right? And I gotta keep up with this addiction that I was dealing with at the time, and I started selling drugs. And I was selling drugs to my people, to my native people. I was bringing it down, my community down even more by being wrapped up in this. And I ended up getting caught. I got caught, and I ended up getting sentenced to 84 months in federal prison over it. And at the time, I felt like it was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. When you get put, you get thrown in that jail cell, and you're sobering up, and your mind's starting to come back to you, and then you start thinking like yourself again, and then you have to sit there and you have to live with that and let that soak in what you did, but you're also looking at a heavy prison sentence now. That was a tough pill for me to swallow. It was a tough pill. And after I went to prison, and also I blamed a lot of people who told on me, all these other people who got me involved in drugs. There was no accountability on my end. I was always trying to blame other people for how I was living. After I get to prison, they started pushing me with doing programming, treatment, all these other things, and I actually went through these programs multiple times. First time I just did it because I wanted to get my points dropped so I can go to a lower prison. And then when I was getting closer to the door, when I had about 3 years left, when I knew I was like, okay, I went from, I got to survive in here, to I'm going to be going home soon. I start thinking about going to that door, like freedom. What am I going to do with it this time? So I started taking those classes more serious, trying to find myself. And the big thing for me where I actually found myself was one of the classes I was taking. It was they have us do like these little worksheets in there, and it was about how do you want to be remembered. And in the worksheet, it was, if you died right now, what would they write in your obituary if they were being truthful? And I was sitting there thinking about it. Okay, I'm sober now, right? But people are going to remember when I was out on the streets. How was I living then? I was a drug dealer. I was carrying guns. I was scaring people. I was all kinds of things that were so negative, that no one could say anything good, So I wrote all that down, and the next part of it was, okay, what do you want it to say? And so I wrote down what I want to say, who I knew I really am inside. I am a good person, I am positive. I do want to do better. I want to see my community do better. So I got to write all that, and then at the end, it tells you, you're still here, you're still living. You can still change this to that, and how do you want to be remembered? And that's that was the turning point for me, because I thought about it, because we all do die one day, and how do we want to be remembered? I don't want to be remembered as a drug addict or a drug dealer or a gangster or a gang member or any of those things. I want to be known as a positive member of my community. I want to be known as a good father. I want to be known as a good brother, sister, role model, all them things, and that was the turning point for me. So from there, I was still I still had 3 years in prison I had to do at that point. So I started looking at life differently, how I carried myself, how those toxic thoughts I always had about things, you know. I learned about letting go. I learned about forgiving myself, you know, which I know a lot of my brothers out here in the streets, they have a hard time doing that. And it was hard for me at first, but now it's easy because we're so prideful. You know, we're so prideful, we don't want to admit when we're wrong, you know, all these things. And when I was able to do that, now I can admit when I'm wrong because we're all, at the end of the day, we're all just people. You know, no one is perfect at all. You know, you can have someone over here with a clean record. They might even be a big time community leader, but they're a toxic person deep down behind closed doors. So when I started figuring that out, I really started loving myself more and realizing who Vinny Dionne is, you know, and that's why I'm so positive now. You know, some people do look at it as like a weakness in me, like Vinny, oh, you're giving them too much credit, or oh, you know, but I believe there's good in everybody. You know, just because someone's a gang member doesn't make them a bad person. You know, because someone's a drug dealer doesn't make them a bad person. They're just wrapped up in the wrong things right now. You know, and that's why I've been trying to work hard to encourage those guys to come over here. Let's do something positive because we're all a part of the community. You know, we're all people. We can do something, you know, with them. And I don't want them to go down the same road I did. You don't have to go do a huge long prison sentence to realize who you are. You know, so after I was released from prison, I started getting focused. What am I going to do with my life when I get out? You know, and I knew I wanted to be a part of this community again. I prayed for it. I sat in my bunk late at night, like, if I get another chance at being in my community, I'm not going to mess this up. All I got to do is keep my sobriety and keep the same mind frame and actually be me and just keep pushing forward. And that's what I've been doing. I get out of prison. I get my first job with the American Indian Community Development Corporation as a security guard because, you know, of course, I'm getting out of prison all buff and whatnot. And everyone's like, yeah, Vinny's the security guard. You know what I mean? And I'm like, you know what? Okay, cool. This isn't where, you know, this is a good start. This isn't where I'm going to end up, though. You know, and I went from that job to another job that wasn't too good to another one. And then before I know it, I'm on the outreach team. I'm actually in the community helping my people that I grew up with, people that I was getting high with are out here, you know. And that's what made me good at my job is because the people, they connect with me because I'm one of them. I was going through the same things that they're going through right now. And so they look to me for guidance and strength, you know. And so I started doing the outreach thing, and I started housing a number of our relatives. I've housed a lot of people. I got really well known here in the community just for my full-time job. And then I started doing all this other work. Then you know, when George Floyd got killed back in 2020, that's when the warrior in me got to come back out. The guy that I was trying to hide from. You know, when I left those prison gates, I also said, okay, I had to be a warrior in here, strong for our Native brothers in here to protect one another. But now I'm out here on the street now. I got to let that go. Then before I know it, boom, chaos. It was the most dangerous I've ever seen the city ever in my entire life. And I stepped up. The warrior in me stepped up. Okay, we need to get out here. We need to protect our people, you know. And like I said, I tried to dead the guy and sweep him under the rug, but he came back out, and people started looking at me differently for that. Okay, this brother's a warrior for the people, you know. And then AIM was reborn here in South Minneapolis, and then, you know, I started talking with them a little more, you know, supporting them, buying their swag, their hats, their shirts, you know. Then they asked me to join, and I did join. We're also a member of the Lord's Protectors I told you about. You know, that's a community group out of Little Earth that's pretty much just residents that live there that want to protect their community. You know, like I said before, it's a really rough place, so that could be, it's a very dangerous, and we don't get paid to do that. You know, it's a dangerous gig. But it's what I do. It's where I'm from. People know me there, so it's a little more, I guess, comfy for me than other people because I know who the tough guys are. You know, they respect me on that level, so I can go talk to them. More times than not, I can talk them down. You know, not all the times though. You know, there have I've seen 2 shootings happen right in front of me. I've seen one of my fellow protectors get shot. Actually, I wasn't there, but he did get shot. And, you know, a lot of shootings, a lot of gunplay going on over there. So,
and I don't know, Rachel, maybe you can add to this, but how much has activism within the American Indian movement, within the Indigenous Protectors movement, Little Earth Protectors, played a role in your community engagement here in South Minneapolis?
I mean, that's just to be the short of the story is pretty much that's my life. Other than like Vinny and family, that's what I do. And it's kind of been like that for me for a long time. I just moved here into Minneapolis back in November. You know, when I was little, we lived here. My dad taught at Heart of the Earth at the Ames School, and my mom was going to school here at the university. And AIM has always been a part of my life, or just like a way of life. I don't know how to explain it. It's just how I was brought up. It's how I was raised. Like, it's the conversations that we're having at the dinner table every night. So when I came here in November after the walk to justice that we did for Palterra from Minneapolis to DC, it was just instantly into community work and activism through the American Indian movement, Indigenous Protectors movement, and Little Earth Protectors, because I don't think he said it, but he's the president of Little Earth Protectors. Little Earth, yeah.
wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, he does wear a lot of hats.
Cool. Well, let's have a little bit of a conversation around responses to the DOJ report or the DOJ investigation. I know that you did a press conference. Was it on Thursday morning? Mm-hmm. And then there was a DOJ listening session. Maybe you can talk about a little bit of the work, because I guess I wasn't aware that there was an MOU with the MPD and the Little Earth community or South Minneapolis, I'm not sure which, that dates back to 2002.
Yeah. So the Unity Community Mediation Team was founded back in 2002, by individuals like Clyde Belcourt and Spike Moss and Al Flowers, different community leaders, not just in the Native community, but all the communities in Minneapolis. And that board, that organization, that group was founded specifically to have an open conversation, accountability, transparency with MPD. And there was an MOU written at that time between the Unity Community Mediation Team and MPD. So Unity Community Mediation Team, which we both sit on that board now, Clyde had put Frank Perro in his position on that board, and then Frank Perro put myself and Vinny on that board in his place. So that board, what we do is we meet monthly with Minneapolis Police Department to review and make sure that they're in compliance with the MOU. We also have Police Community Relationship Council, where we're talking with them, making sure that they're building or trying to work towards building trust within the communities. But that board kind of, after that MOU, and over the years, it kind of got a little stagnant. And then when George Floyd was murdered back in 2020, it kind of like regrounded it or reignited that board. And they're the ones, Unity Community Mediation Team is actually who requested the investigation from the Department of Justice. They also requested an investigation from the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, which they finished their investigation, I think it was back in April, and they wrote a consent decree, which is what it sounds like the DOJ is trying to do as well. And Unity, we've been a part of that whole process. We were meeting with commissioners with the state for that consent decree. And it's really right now trying to keep that door open for community to have a say in how this consent decree is written with the DOJ, between the DOJ and the MPD in the city. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
So let me get this straight. The Community Unity group requested the DOJ, but the DOJ, to your knowledge, didn't reach out to you all for an investigation.
To my knowledge, the DOJ did not reach out to anybody on Unity. Like Vinny said, nobody that we know in Community was asked. I've asked several directors in MUD if they had heard anything.
Which is the Minneapolis Urban
Indian directors.
Right?
Right. They're like the directors of all the main indigenous orgs in South Minneapolis. They had not. And I asked one of the DOJ investigators, where they got their data. And they said a lot of it was from MPD interviews, ride-alongs, and body cam footage. So not any actual community, or not many community interviews that I'm aware of.
Vinny, can you maybe talk a little bit? I mean, there's some really graphic stuff in the report. I don't know if you've read it. I don't think you really need to read it to understand. I mean, you've lived it. But can you maybe talk about the attitude of MPD historically towards the Native community?
Oh yeah, definitely. I can tell you all about them. Bullies. Growing up around here, they walk around when they have that badge on, they're like, they have power. And they flex that power all over us since I was a kid each and every day. When you see a police officer out here, MPD, you're scared. Very rarely. Now, there have been some good officers, I will say. Sometimes they would come help me coach baseball when I was the athletic director at Little Earth, So there were some that were cool. But for the most part, we get a lot of these racist cowboys.
And that's what they call themselves, as cowboys.
Yeah.
That was actually in the report. And Derek Chauvin was part of this cowboy group.
They send the cowboys to South Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Where the natives are.
No doubt. And Chauvin, he worked at Little Earth at one point. So we had guys like him, work in our community every day. And he's just one of many, honestly. And we know that. And so, yeah, it could be dangerous walking to the store.
We also found that MPD officers routinely disregard the safety of people in their custody. Our review found numerous incidents in which MPD officers responded to a person's statement that they could not breathe with the version of, "You can breathe, you're talking right now." We also found that MPD officers failed to intervene to prevent unreasonable use of force by other officers. Indeed, as outlined in our report, years before he killed George Floyd, Derek Chauvin used excessive force on other occasions in which multiple MPD officers stood by and did not stop him. Second, we found that MPD unlawfully discriminates against Black and Native American people in its enforcement activities, including the use of force following stops. Based on our review of the data, MPD officers stop, search, and then use force against people who are Black and Native American at disproportionate rates. The data showed, for example, that MPD stopped Black and Native American people nearly 6 times more often than white people in situations that did not result in arrest or citation, given their shares of the population. We found several incidents in which MPD officers were not held accountable for racist conduct until there was a public outcry. For example, after MPD officers stopped a car carrying 4 Somali American teens, one officer told the teens, quote, "Do you remember what happened in Black Hawk Down when we killed a bunch of your folk? I'm proud of that. We didn't finish the job over there. If we had, you guys wouldn't be over here right now."
And I get it. Like when I was a gang leader, I knew what the game I was playing, cops and robbers, you know what I mean? That's my enemy, just like I'm their enemy. So, to me, coming up, when I was living that life, I understood what it was. I understood if they see me, I'm getting a gun thrown on me and I'm laying on the ground, or I'm going to take off running and try to catch me, So, but when you change your life around, Not even just me changing my life, but there's a lot of guys I knew that didn't live that lifestyle. You know, that were just your regular old native brother or sister trying to live their life, and they get harassed because of what another guy like myself, when I was living that point, you know, all of a sudden everybody fits that description. You know, and that's how it's been going on. When I changed my life around, I went from, now I'm not a target no more, but I'm still a target because I fit the description. Native male, you know, native male with a gun, native male did this, native male did that. So they're going to run up on every single native male, you know, if that's what the call is, and we're getting harassed. You know, we're going to get pulled over. We're going to get they're going to look for any little reason to search our vehicle. They're going to look for any reason to tow our vehicle. They're going to look for any reason to really mess with us, you know, and that's been, like I said, I lived here my whole life. I'm 42 years old now. That's been how it is around here my whole life, dealing with law enforcement with the MPD.
Yeah, and just some of the statistics for those that are listening or watching, you know, they detail specifically targeting Native youth and the amount of times and the percentage that they draw guns on Native youth as compared to white youth, or even compared to adults. So Native youth are like, I think it was like 19 times more likely to have guns drawn on them by the APD to use, you know, the threatening to use deadly force than an average white adult in the city of Minneapolis. But also one of the elements of the report detailed disability. People who are undergoing a mental health crisis, which is a lot of people in the Native community, especially if you're, you know, addicted to something, you know, there's going to be an issue. There's usually an underlying issue there.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know you work specifically with the unhoused community, and they do a lot. The city does a lot of sweeps of these encampments, and they do that in the middle of winter.
It's crazy. I've never seen other cities handle it like how Minneapolis handles it.
Yeah.
No doubt. I'm going to answer. This is where my mind went. I think about when law enforcement rolls up on you. They expect you to comply with whatever demand that they have of you. And that's why I said where they have the power, because when they're coming up, they're standing up here and you're down here. And that's how they treat you. Get on the ground. You're going to listen to me. That's how they'll approach you. You're just walking down the street like, oh, what? You know? And they expect you to comply. And if you don't comply, guess what? They're going to beat you up. So like our brothers and sisters out here that are suffering with mental health, I can see that, because when you have mental health issues, you're not going to listen. You know, so when you don't listen, guess what they're going to do? They're going to kick the snot right out of you. And that's what they do. And that's why I could see that happening to people with mental health issues, because you're not going to comply. You know, like I knew when every time I got stopped, if I didn't want to take a whooping, I complied. You know, sometimes I was down for a whooping. All right, you know, I'm not going to comply. Catch me first. You know, and I would do that. And, you know, when I was a young man, I used to like to outrun the cops. It was kind of fun to me. I used to outrun them all the time, you know. So, but back to our unsheltered relatives that are living on the street right now. It is, it's disgusting the way that they will. Now, granted, they're starting to change their way they're doing these things, but let's just say just a few months back and the way it's been going, they will hit a raid on a homeless encampment like they're raiding a drug house.
Yeah.
They will come in 30 squad cars deep. They'll block in everything. Like, just for them, I feel the trauma with them that you're going through. You're just a homeless person living in a tent, and all of a sudden you're getting kettleballed in, barricaded in, and they're running up on you, you know, and they're coming just like they would for a normal raid, you know, and that's scary. And as my job as an outreach worker, I would try to find out when they were going to close these camps, because there was a time where they used to tell us, then they stopped telling us because we had these young kids that were being camp defenders that were actually fighting them off, you know. So they stopped telling us. So then we would try to find out when they were going to do it so we could be there to keep it on, so we could record, make sure they're not beating anybody up, or, you know. And but within the last few months, there's a new cop in there. He's actually been calling me like, hey, Vinny, we got to close this camp over here. He's like, we're not trying to come in guns blazing. We're trying to do a soft closure, you know. And And I appreciate them for that, to be totally honest, you know, because they're taking a different stance on it now. They're not coming in guns blazing, kicking down tents and all this other craziness that they were doing. So they're being more respectful about it. As much as I don't agree with the camp closures, but they're from their job, they're being more respectful about it.
And you started talking a little bit, Rachel, about the kind of just the brutality of these camp closures. Because I remember one was happening at a Home Depot on the north side, where it's actually close to where I live, and it was in the middle of winter. And I remember I actually went to go get groceries that day, and the whole parking lot was closed down, and there were like there's police lights everywhere, and it's like, you guys can't even clean a sidewalk with snow, but you can clean a sidewalk if there's a person sleeping on it really quickly. Mm-hmm. Like, the whole city mobilizes.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. Because when you were talking about like the brutality of the camp closures here, because I was thinking of other cities I've lived in, like Los Angeles, that has high numbers of unhoused relatives, right? Like, they're not doing these like crazy camp raid evictions. There's other ways. They're just putting a Band-Aid on the issue, on the problem. Not even a Band-Aid, really. It's like they just don't want to deal with it. It's like out of sight, out of mind. Like, we'll just move them and get them to the next spot, and we'll bulldoze everything, and we'll shut the block down so nobody can see like what we're doing, and then we'll just do it again in like a month. You know, it's just when they do it in the winter, you know, during the Roof Depot occupation, one of our demands was that they stopped the camp evictions, specifically during the winter time, because with these brutal winters here, right, which is completely different than Los Angeles, when there's a camp eviction and they're bulldozing camps and getting rid of supplies, it's like a death threat. Like, I don't understand how it's not illegal to do that to people, you know, to evict and raid and shut down a camp and expect somebody to have a completely different situation set up somewhere else that they can be able to survive that night in less than a few hours. Like, I don't understand how a city can do that legally.
Yeah.
And you know, when they evict them out, they're throwing everything away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If they have IDs, medications, any kind of food, clothing, then they got to start over. And as an outreach worker, they'll move to one camp to the next. All of a sudden, I'm getting calls. Hey, can you help me find a tent? Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And also, I help a lot of people with housing. It makes it harder every time we do. When there is a camp, right? We know where they're at. We can go check on them every day. We can go do a housing assessment with them, and we're just waiting. I can get them on the list, and I just got to wait till their name gets called on this list. Sometimes it takes 3-4 months, you know. But within that time frame, they're my client, so I have to work with them, you know, and keep up to date with them, you know. And they have to check in with me every 30 days because I have to redo their paper, you know, re-up their paperwork, check it in with me. So this happened more than once. I'll get a camp closure, and I'll try to find out where everybody went, or I'll try to be there to figure out where everyone goes, but sometimes I'm not always there, and I'll lose clients from that closure to the next one because they didn't go with that group to another camp. They might have went over here or wherever else they could find, and then their name comes up for a housing housing referral, like they have housing, and I can't find them now. You know, I had them over here where I was getting to get them housed. All of a sudden, I don't know where they're at because they did a closure. This happened to me just recently. A closure that day, that night, that afternoon, I get the email, you know, a housing provider. Hey, we have the referral, they can move in. And I can't find that person. And I was never able to find the person. You know?
I feel like MPD, like in a lot of these situations, I'm thinking about like the unhoused and kind of like what happened at the Roof Depot. MPD has become kind of like this, like a pawn, or they can be militarized against the people by the city. And this is my personal viewpoint. I'm not speaking for anybody else or Vinny, like, or anything like that.
No, I agree with that
just
viewpoint.
to be clear, because there's a lot of issues or things that need to be addressed and handled by the city government, by the city of Minneapolis, that are not. And when it's a situation that they don't want to deal with, or they haven't established the appropriate like resource network for things like our unhoused to get the resources they need to be healed from active addiction, to have access to culture and ceremony, to clean what is it, like the using sites, all
safe consumption sites.
Yeah, safe consumption sites, treatment centers, tiny home villages, how permanent camp areas that we're not, like, our outreach workers aren't constantly chasing them down. These kind of things that city could be investing in, they don't want to do that. They just weaponize the MPD to go out in some kind of like militarized raid to deal with it in that moment. And it's similar to what happened at the Roof Depot. We had a peaceful, prayerful occupation of the Roof Depot site back in February of this year. In that situation, no drugs, no alcohol, no weapons, and the entire MPD was weaponized under the orders of the mayor to come and raid and evict that camp. And it was very similar to how they shut our unhoused camps down. They completely circled the block, cut it off, cut community out. Nobody could come in. No media could go in to even record what was going on. And they came in and they raided camp, and they were kicking tents and pulling tents down, whether somebody was in it or not. And it was just very aggressive in the way that it was done. And they were militarized by the mayor.
And the camp itself at Roof Depot was a response to the mayor, who refused to actually meet with the community. And I think that's important to point out, because we were at a DOJ hearing on last Thursday, a couple days ago, and there was a man from the city there, and he kept saying that Mayor Fry isn't hiding, he's confronting this. And we all saw it. He was hiding. He literally hid from the people who came to the office from Little Earth to talk about not demolishing the Roof Depot, which is, a toxic site. And so I thought that was just like really fascinating, because it gets to a different kind of level of erasure of Indigenous people in this city, and an unwillingness to actually listen to what they're saying and what they're demanding, what they say that needs to be done. But then also just excluding them from the process of, whether it's the DOJ the investigation, which sounds like it came partially from the Indigenous community, to what actually needs to be done to address the housing crisis here. Because, I could just jump on a soapbox here for a second. The city held a city council vote during Eid, a Muslim holiday.
I was literally about to bring this up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to talk about it.
No, you go ahead. Okay. You're probably more well-versed on it than I am.
I mean, there were 3 city council members, Muslim city council members, who sat out that day because they were celebrating the religious holiday, the Muslim religious holiday. And the city council, there's no way that they didn't know that they weren't going to be in attendance. And I think the actual person who drafted this rent control bill, or this rent control resolution that was put forward to put it up to vote to implement rent control, they didn't have the majority to support this resolution. And these other city councilors, most of whom are white, most of them are reactionary. One of them is my city councilor, Rainville. He's my councilor. They put this up to vote knowing that it would fail because they didn't have the 3 Muslim city council members. And this gets into a kind of broader issue around housing, because a lot of the people are exposed to the elements, whether it's winter, increased violence on the street because they don't have secure housing. And now we know from police themselves. And one thing that I felt like the DOJ report didn't address adequately, and partially that may be due to a failure to actually engage the Native community, is how many interventions or engagements or interactions they have because somebody is simply living on the street. Like, how does that factor into? I mean, I'm not asking you guys to answer that question, but it was like, that was a big question of mine, because The only time I actually see MPD on the south side is actually going after mostly houseless Native people on the street.
That's been one of our major critiques of MPD, like on the Unity Community Mediation Team and in the compliance meetings that we have with them, because, after George Floyd and the riots, they're down 388 officers, but crime's down, right? Like, but they, unless you are dying, like, they don't come. If your car gets stolen, they don't come. If you got break-in, they don't come. Like, we were outside of our home and a stolen Kia goes flying by, and there's an MPD officer sitting right there in his cruiser, and we were like, get him, get, and he turned the other direction, like turned the other way. They don't come. That one video you took that night that the camp was raided at Roof Depot, where it had all the entire MPD and then the missing murdered Indigenous woman picture from a missing relative and community there, like on the posts. They don't come to help us. They don't come to help our community.
They all came out to evict a camp as exercising free speech.
Under the order of the mayor.
Yeah, under the order of the mayor. So let's get into that element, because I know we don't have the AC on in here and we're all like sweating. But
I feel like I'm in the beginning of a sweat lodge, like you just shut the door.
Let's talk about the accountability of the mayor and the city, because this city, which I'm assuming is like other cities, the mayor has the final say over the MPD. He's the guy. And now with the strong mayor, whatever, ordinance or whatever they have now, he's even more responsible. And the current mayor can't point to the previous mayor and say, oh, well, this is the previous administration's fault, because he has been the mayor when George Floyd was murdered, all the way up into the present, where the vast majority of this investigation actually took place. So this happened under his watch. So what responsibility does he bear?
So that's been kind of like one of my concerns, because, when this consent decree is going to be drafted between DOJ and the city and MPD, like, that's kind of like a closed room. Like, that's a closed room discussion. Like, we're pushing for community members to be in that room as it's drafted, as it's being negotiated, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Like, that's what a lot of community members want. But why would we have somebody like the mayor in there negotiating a consent decree for the city, for our communities, for our people, when literally all of this has happened under his watch? Like, if you're a leader, you have to take responsibility for the things that happen under your leadership. And I feel like he has not done that. There's not any accountability. I haven't seen an acknowledgement from MPD, an apology from MPD to our communities after this report, which I was kind of thinking that maybe they would, because it would just seem like the honorable thing to do, but they haven't even done that. So how can we expect or trust the city to negotiate something so important that's going to affect not only our generation, but generations to come? Like, how can we trust them to do something like that for us and us not even be in the room?
Do you have anything to add to that, Vinny? We have to turn on the bleep and the censor.
You might have to. I'm just gonna keep it very, very short when it comes to our mayor. He's gonna go down in history as the worst mayor we've ever had. All the crap that's happened under his leadership and his watch is just like not good. To be nice, it's not good. You know. I mean, I'll just leave it at that. He's probably the worst mayor I've ever seen here.
Yeah, I think there's there's this other element of it too, where this was brought up in this DOJ hearing by the city councilor or the city person who was there advocating for the city. Strangely,
I think that the city sent that person.
Yeah, it was a very.
They took up a lot of time of community's time.
They derailed the entire conversation, and
he did, and I believe I do think he was sent in because I'd never seen him before either.
I never.
He calls me out of the meeting. He's like, "Hey, brother," he came, shook my hand, and I was like, "Hey, my name's, I don't know, was it Michael Smith or something? I work for whatever."
It's like a real generic name.
It was because I was talking about being, myself when I was beaten by the police. And of course it was some years back, but one of the incidents I had my hands up. I had my hands up and my back turned to him, and he says, "Turn around." As soon as I turned around, he sucker punched me right in the eye, and when he sucker punched me right in the eye, my eyes started trying to close up. And this dude grabs me like this and starts pushing it back in. And honestly, I was hoping my eye would close up because then he'd be scared to bring me to jail. So I had a misdemeanor warrant at the time. I can't remember what it was for. Maybe running from him, I can't remember. But it was a misdemeanor warrant. And he pushed my eye. My eye was starting to swell up, and he pushed it back in. Then he calls his other officers over here, like, "How does he look?" "He's fine." "All right, take him to jail." And I went to jail over that. That was one incident. Another incident, I'll be honest, I had a bag of weed on me. I used to be a weed dealer at the time. I might have had maybe an ounce on me. And with my brother, we're in a car, we get pulled over. And also my brother had a warrant at the time. So he's my younger brother. As the bigger brother, I'm like, okay, I'm going to run from these guys. When I was very, very athletic. And 9 times out of 10, I know I could outrun these guys. So I was like, "Hey, bro, I'm going to get out of the car. I'm going to run. I'm going to get away. I know you have a warrant. Use my name, and if they somehow catch me, I'll use your name and I'll go to jail under your name. But they're not going to catch you. Don't worry." So that's what happened. They pulled me out of the car. Like I said, I had a bag of weed, and my brother had a warrant. So as soon as I got out of the car, I did a spin move on him, and I took off. And I dipped on him. And I must have ran maybe a good 8 blocks straight, and I collapsed. And I fell underneath the car. Well, I rolled under a car. I was trying to hide from them, right? And anyway, they brought the dog out, and the dog got me. And that's how they found me. And they stomped me out. I got stomped out they maced me first, and then they stomped me out when I was underneath the car. They maced me, then they got me out. Then they stomped me out. They gave me a good beating. And what that mace did, though, it like made everything like I couldn't feel anything, So I was laughing at them as they're kicking me and punching me, and I was telling them that it didn't hurt. And most natives I know, we could take pain. We're warriors. It's just how we are. You know what I mean? Like fighting whatever, we could take a licking. And so I ended up getting whooped pretty good for that, and I ended up going to jail. So those are the 2 times I was assaulted by law enforcement. And I lost my train of thought. What was the original question?
Oh, it was about that guy from the city.
Him. Yeah, I believe that I was telling that story. And so he heard my story. He wasn't even inside of where we were meeting at. He was outside in the hallway, and he starts doing this to me from the hallway. I was like, "I don't know this dude." And I'm like, so I went over there, and he's like, "Hey, if you want to, you could file a report." I'm like, "Bro, that was a long time ago. Like, we're talking decades ago. I'm not even worried about it." Then he started trying, "Well, if you ever need any help, blah, 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 whatever." So I go sit back down. Then he joins. And then he's getting like very opinionated. He like takes over our whole meeting. This is a meeting for the indigenous community. This guy comes in talking about, "Oh, I live by Lake Harriet," which if you don't know, that's a very rich white neighborhood over there.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
He was trying to make it sound like, because he was challenging the other DOJ guy who is from the South Side apparently. I didn't know that. But then he was like, and he's like, "I live over here," and I was like, "I don't even know. I'm not from here, so I don't know where that is." But it's hilarious that it's
so it is when all the local Minneapolis people, they challenge you by where you live, how rough it was, like how rough was your upbringing, and we could tell by where you come from. That's why someone like me from Little Earth, I get a lot of respect from other Southsiders because of where we grew up, because everyone knows how rough it is there. Not just you know, you could die at any moment, getting robbed or whatever, but also the police, like the whole thing that comes with it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why that guy called the other guy out, because he was from the nicer part of Southside, you know? But he was really he says he lives by Lake Harriet. Anybody who knows Lake Harriet, that's like one of the richest places in Minneapolis over there. So yeah, him working for the city, bringing that up, I kind of felt like he was planning over there, because he was talking about, I talked to the mayor, and you know,
I've just never seen him at any community.
I've never seen him at anything, and
like
we deal with a lot of not just Native communities. We go in all these other communities, you know, so we get to know people. And I've never seen that guy ever before, and seeing him how he was trying to talk about, you guys as community leaders need to go talk to the mayor and all these other things, and we're like, no.
Yeah.
As of right now, no. You know, I understand, he is the mayor, and we might need to make good with them eventually down the road, but as of right now, he caused too much trauma on our community, where our community is not messing with them right now.
Yeah.
You know, the indigenous community is not messing with the dude.
Yeah. No, I think that point was well taken, even at the end of the hearing, because they were just like, I think those guys wanted to walk out of there with like, oh, you guys are doing the right thing, thanks for this. But I think what people, and you said this, Vinny, just now, what people fail to forget or fail to acknowledge is the immense amount of trauma that specifically the 3rd Precinct has endured. And there's a reason why. You know, I'm not from here, but I'm smart enough to I've been around, talked to people, smart enough to know that that precinct was hated by the community. Even the people who probably like cops hated that precinct.
Mm-hmm.
The reason it burnt down.
It was and there's probably a reason it probably won't get rebuilt. But that's all, and I think there's an acceptance or an acknowledgement that it was within a Black community or targeting the Black community, but there's also not an acknowledgement that they were the cowboys that were targeting Native people a lot of the time. And you see this in that report. And I think it's not to say that like what Black folks experience is, you know, any less traumatic. It's to say that the trauma that the Native community also needs to be acknowledged as well. Yeah. And I think it got lost in a lot of that. And the crazy thing about it for me is reading how many MPD officers went out on disability for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because they traumatized themselves from beating the crap out of mostly kids. Because if you look at their encounters with kids, like it's Black kids and Native kids. Mm-hmm. So it's like, wait, you went out and like beat up children, now you're traumatized for it, and you want to collect PTSD benefits until you're...
Our PTSD benefits.
It's exactly what I was thinking. And because it's like, and I think that also needs to be acknowledged. It's not just the police, there's other factors that are happening. I mean, with the Roof Depot thing, the city really wanted to get the Native community out of the way so they could do their project. Yeah. And they're willing to mobilize the police to do it on multiple times, multiple occasions.
And I think this is what I've been working on since I've been released from prison, is building back the Native community, building back the indigenous voice. Out here in this city, when I was a young kid, we didn't have just Little Earth. You know, we had Little Earth all the way from Little Earth all the way to Chicago Avenue, from Franklin Avenue to Lake Street. Those were all indigenous people right there. It was all natives. That's how I grew up, being surrounded by a bunch of Native people. And it's not like that no more. There's been other communities moving in, the Somali community, the Mexican community, you know, the Latino community. They're all coming in now. And I don't know what happened to a lot of our people. I think a lot of our people might have ran back to the reservations, but we don't have the numbers that we once had. We're not as strong as we once were. And so here we are. We're the minority of the minorities in our own community, in our own country, you know, and it's a kind of a tough pill for me to swallow, because I remember when we were strong 20 years ago, you know, maybe 30 years ago. I want to get that back, get back to being strong, get back to when Clyde was out here. When Clyde Belcourt was out here in his prime, he held this community together. He was a very powerful voice and a person and a advocate for the community. That's something we've been missing lately. And that's something that we're trying to bring back, you know, is having that strong voice, community building, letting all the people know that we're stronger when we work together. You know, so much traumas we deal with, not just generational, but going on in our day-to-day lives, especially growing up at Little Earth and areas like that, where we don't want to see each other succeed. You know, and that's something that I've been working on myself personally, you know, because I once lived like that too. If I seen another strong Native brother over there doing some big, heavy, cool stuff, I used to be like, damn, who the hell does he think he is? You know, now if I see another strong Native brother doing something, I'm going to go congratulate him. Hey, brother, how you doing? I'm going to try to make that connection, because we're going to need more people like him and more people like her. And everyone can bring very good stuff to the table, you know, and that's how we need that in order for us to be stronger.
You have to have that when you're taking on systems like MPD or like the city of Minneapolis or the United States government. Like, our people, we have to be strong. And I think that part of the responsibility of our generation is keeping that spirit of resistance and that strength alive, and also re-waking it up. I feel like it hasn't really been woken up since the 70s, and I feel that, you know, with Standing Rock, with Thacker Pass, with all of these different movements of resistance against colonial governments and institutions, I feel like our people are waking back up. And Minneapolis is a part of that story.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really good place to kind of leave it, because I mean, there's so much to be said. And, you know, I guess one observation that I had moving here, and it's not an observation that I was trying to think back at what it was like when I was in Albuquerque, but one thing that I find really troubling is we're the three of us are somewhat the same age, you know, we're in the same kind of generation. But when you look at people who show up to these meetings, there's nobody from our age group coming out.
We're it right now.
Yeah,
here.
and it's that scares me, and it goes back to like what Vinny was saying too. It's like we have to really reach out to young people, you know, and I think that's, you see it, they understand that these things are bad. They're not dumb. It's just being positive, sober role models within the community. It's like, that's really what it's about, and that's really why I love you guys, because you know, it's hard to find. It's sad to say, but it's hard to find, you know. But anyways, I don't know if you guys have any like parting thoughts on all this, like in terms of like people listening, what can they do to best support?
As far as the situation with the Department of Justice and MPD,
but also the work that y'all are doing.
I would say that if you are a resident here in Minneapolis and you have the time and the ability to go to these hearings and listening sessions with the Department of Justice, because that's not closed room for like only organizational leaders or community leaders or people who hold certain titles. Like, if you're a community member, come, you know, and be there and, you know, have your voice at the table. You know, and as far as the kind of work that we do and the work that's going on across Turtle Island, I would just say get involved, you know, get sober, start working for our people, because it's going to take all of us.